Hi guys, welcome to Latent Space.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. You guys are the founders of AlphaXiv, which I've confirmed is the official pronunciation. What's each of yours sort of origin story of coming together and starting this?
Sure, yeah. So I'm Raj. I guess all of us were at Stanford before. I was roommates with Rayhahn actually, and still am for the last like 5 years. And I guess started off doing AI research like a lot of others at Stanford, and was in Dorsa's lab, also working with Percy a little bit, and was kind of working at the intersection of robotics and NLP. And I think honestly, like the real origin story is one day Rayhan and we were in like our operating systems class. It was like really late at like 1 a.m. Rayhan's like, "Hey, do you want to see my like final web dev class project?" And I'm like, "Hey, what makes you think I want to see that right now? We're trying to get this like piece in and go home." And he was like, "No, you should look at it. It's pretty cool." And I was like, "Okay, sure, show it." And it was basically like really jank like view comment button next to like every paragraph of like an archive paper, and the idea is like, hey, you could like comment on papers. And I was like, hey, this is like kind of cool. We should like just like work on it. It's kind of strange that there aren't comments on archive papers, given that how many people are reading, and like AI papers are growing exponentially.
Yeah.
So we kind of just like started working on it for fun. We showed it to like our lab, and they're like, this is pretty cool. Like they'd use it if it takes off. But I think it really became serious when like it went viral. Like one of our friends who was at Fair at the time posted about it on LinkedIn, went viral. And yeah, from there we started working with Sebastian, who was our advisor. And yeah, it's been pretty cool.
Yeah, I'll give right on the line. Yeah, my name's Rayhahn. Before working on AlphaXiv as an undergrad, was doing research in robotics and RL. A lot of this was still before GPT. So the thinking with as an undergrad, as a meager undergrad, your PhD mentor gives you papers and you struggle to understand them. And so the thinking was that there should be some Stack Overflow analogy for archive papers, that surely there are other undergrads out here that have these questions. And obviously since then it's taken many forms, but that was kind of the initial iteration.
I mean, like Raj and Rayhan, I also did research in undergrad, this sparse deep learning research with Stanford Compiler's group. And I think kind of like what Rayhan is, where it's like we all had this shared experience as undergrad researchers, and it was like, it seems very simple, just the simple premise of comment section for archive papers.
Yeah.
And it was just sort of a project that we worked on, 20, 30 hours a week whenever we had, free time. And obviously it's just sort of launched from that. And it's been a really exciting journey.
I guess the reason that when I first saw AlphaXiv, I didn't necessarily think about it as new, was because I knew that Hugging Face had also launched like a paper discussion thing. And like, well, so, Hugging Face is huge. Why did you seem to win or break out versus them?
Yeah, I think there were a few things. Even when we were just comments, I think the core of it was we were our product's ICP. Like we knew Hugging Face papers existed. And felt like some of those problems weren't solved. So something as simple as being able to comment directly on the paper, the user interface. I think when we started, we were very deliberate about getting authors like from Laura, DPO, Llama 3, and actually having really useful, cool exchanges. And then those would get shared. And
did you like reach out to them and say, hey, please do it here?
Yeah, we would use our existing kind of like people from people we knew from research.
That's rough. Yeah.
But from there it would grow like really, really quickly. And I think from comments, there's been a really natural progression that we've taken that hasn't been with other kind of paper platforms. So when commenting took off, we're like, okay, we have a good idea of what papers people are reading, right? So if you're trying to discover papers, on one end of the spectrum is like the archive sort by new, right? So you have like 1,000 papers every day, sort by new. And on the other end of the spectrum is like Twitter. So like, okay, actually this is a good chance to put together some higher signal feed of papers based on the interaction. So commenting became a feed of papers. And then from there, it's like, oh, a lot of the questions people are asking can be probably answered by AI. Gemini came out with the 1 million context thing. Okay, let's throw that on here. So we've kind of progressed and built a more cohesive experience, just growing our user base and pulling that thread.
Just on the Gemini note, do you parse PDF to text and then context, or just throw the images in?
So depends on the model.
Yeah.
Some of these like we support a bunch of different models. Some are just text based. We with models like Claude, we try to pass in the relevant diagrams as well. So
What's the best PDF parsing model?
ooh, that's a good question. In the last month, there's been like a flurry of different OCR models that have come out starting.
Oh yeah, DeepSeek. How's that?
So I think in terms of cost and accuracy, DeepSeek is pretty good. Like if you host it on your own A100s and just like you batch things properly, probably DeepSeek is best bang for your buck. There are services that like Mistral that have their APIs. Those are probably
Mistral OCR, Omo OCR.
yes. And those might be a little bit more expensive if you're using their API offering. But I think like DeepSeek OCR is very, very good.
Any Moondream?
Oof. I probably
yeah,
haven't played not that yet.
Yeah.
But the OCR example is really funny. Like it's one of the cool things we see on AlphaXiv, which is on day one, someone will release an OCR model. And then the next 2-3 days, like 4 other people who've been probably working on this for the last many months will go put out their own LCR model.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of cool to see the value that AlphaXiv brings there.
Yeah, cool. So what's the progress of the company? You guys decided it was a side project.
Yeah.
When did you decide to, I guess, take it to the next step?
Yeah.
And also, where are you at now?
Yeah, for sure. So I think for the first year or 2 of working on it was a project. And what really forced that transition for us was we were looking at papers with code, weights and biases, Hugging Face. And we're like, okay, we have a user base that really loves what we're doing. And obviously research extends so much more beyond papers, right? Like we want to do things with other artifacts of research. One of the things we're going to be working on is making it really easy for people to play around with like implementations of papers directly on the site.
Are you full replacement for papers with code already? Or
I would say so, yeah, because we have like benchmarks and a lot of it, like the state of the art page.
because I know a lot of people miss it.
Down.
Yeah.
It was taken down. So we've added with the feed, the benchmarks, whatever. But I think the thing that drove us to be a company was there are so many different artifacts of research beyond papers, and it just kind of made sense to go from there.
Yeah. I don't know if any of the others want to chime in.
Yeah, I think like kind of the analogy of like archive existed and we came in and like built like an intelligent layer of our archive, much nicer interface with tools to quickly understand core ideas on papers, comment. Like if we can do the same thing for like benchmarks, right? You mentioned like papers with code used to be good. It was still a lot of like community driven, like people would upload their own benchmarks or like, implementations or whatnot. Like now with LLMs, it's like really easy. Like we can just parse through like using OCR, like from charts and tables, like what are the leading like models and papers, ideas on benchmarks, and just bring them all in one place. And kind of one way to think of it is like just help people make sense of like the firehose of AI research. And that's just not papers, like benchmarks, models. So yeah, implementation.
Yeah, I mean the thing I really want, which is easy to do now, is just like put out a monitor of like when this topic comes up, let me know. So like a custom feed of stuff. Yeah,
that's also where we want to put a lot of work into our assistant, is like kind of have the best research assistant that knows your interests and can like give you most relevant and up to date like research.
So it's really like a personalization and ranking system, a recommendation system of papers. Anything else that is underappreciated? Like, do you see yourself as a social network, a Rexis, Goodreads,
No,
Genius.com?
Yeah.
I don't know.
We've gone through multiple iterations, and I think where we kind of provide the most value is as concretely like not a social network, but kind of a tool over research. And maybe there's some signal that's from some type of social signal, but concretely people use this as a tool to understand research. And I think one thing that's underappreciated is that papers are like the tip of the iceberg of research. And I think we're very well positioned to help people beyond just the workflow of reading papers. So you could imagine one thing we're really interested in, it's not publicly released yet, but we want to start maintaining like Docker images for papers and make it really easy for people to spin up implementations directly from their browser. And a lot of times when people are reading papers, why are they reading papers? Our audience is like a lot of applied researchers. So they're figuring out what research is relevant for them. And to get that, you need more than what a paper can tell you. At the end of the day, papers are great, but they're like a puff piece for the implementation. That's what they are. And so getting closer to what the signal of the research is means you need to allow people to play around with the implementation. So I think one thing that's underappreciated is how much potential there is here to do things beyond papers in this realm of making tools for researchers.
I think even with the current state of the site, I would say that if you want a sort of bird's eye view on the state of AI research, on the state of AI in general, I think AlphaXiv is the best place to do it. And if you look at places like Twitter, I mean, there's a lot of stuff on Twitter, but it's very noisy. If you look at Hugging Face, sure, there's the model weights, data sets, there's certain pieces here, but it's not really a cohesive, holistic experience. And I think that something that we've done is obviously we started in the comment section, but we sort of created a platform that anyone, ranging from ML researchers to like VCs, if they just want to stay up to date with what's going on in AI, I think AlphaXiv has become that place. And obviously, like Ryan has alluded to, we don't want to go deeper. We don't want AlphaXiv just to be a place where you just look at things and you're just surveying things. You want it also to be a place where eventually you are doing your own experimentation. You are actually working with lots of implementations of papers. And I think that we're just sort of scratching the surface of what's possible here.
So we're here at NeurIPS. You've been here the longest, and you have some like I asked you guys to like maybe talk about like maybe top papers of the year, top papers of NeurIPS, your favorite paper that you can shut up about. Obviously, you're working at AlphaXiv, you have to love papers. Go for it.
Like, go ahead. Okay, sure. I think so. One category of papers, and I'll start by prefacing. We saw the quote on Twitter from Ilya that like the age of scaling is done now. It's the age. I feel like we see some embodiment of that in AlphaXiv, where obviously the people posting open research may not always have thousands of GPUs, right? And so you're forced to come up with like really creative solutions that to problems with limited compute. And whether these translate to like practical applications or not is maybe a separate thing. But I always find these type of papers very interesting. So one paper that like for the last month I can't shut up about is tiny recursive models, TRMs. Simplification of
related to HRMs.
Just a simplification of HRMs, which is like biologically inspired. TRM cuts out all the biological inspiration, says, hey, let's take like a 7 million parameter transformer model, have it pass its latent vector and output to itself recursively, and use that, so a 7 million parameter model, to get like really, really good results, relatively speaking, on really specific but challenging puzzle tasks. So like Sudoku, ArcAGI, I believe it gets like 45, 50% on ArcAGI1, compared to like, it's not state of the art, but you compare that to like DeepSeek R1 or Gemini 2.5, it's like pretty good. So I think these types of creative solutions are really fun. They're well received on AlphaXiv all the time, like when these type of papers come about. And so I think just as a nerd for papers, I find that really, really cool. Another one is like really recent, I believe from like the last week or two, the evolutionary strategies are at hyperscale. So basically we're going to cut out gradient descent and use like low rank perturbations at like million parameter scale and get like really, really good results.
So use search rather than gradient descent.
Yeah, some random perturbations. You can't do this over a million parameters at once, right? That doesn't make, but you can make a low rank perturbation, sets of low rank perturbations, and then apply that. And so it's evolutionary, right? And you get like pretty good results compared to like, I believe they based compared to like GRPL or on some tasks. And I thought that was also, it was trending on AlphaXiv, and I was like, this is Evolutionary works like this. And again, whether it scales to anything, I don't know, but it's cool to see this kind of work.
Love it.
Yeah,
great, Rex. Let's keep going around.
I think one area that's also been really exciting, especially among our user base, and I'm seeing here at NeurIPS as well, is like AI for science. Like kind of,
we're starting a dedicated AI for science pod. It's my second podcast.
That's awesome. Super exciting. Yeah, we kind of have like a big community as well, and actually we're doing an event on Saturday.
Oh shit.
Yeah.
Well, I'll bring my new hosts. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, that would be exciting. So we have like one of the co-founders of Lila, James Zhou from Stanford, Jeff Qwen as well, and I think like I was first really excited. I saw this paper. It was earlier this year called Agent Laboratory from Sam Schmidt-Go from DeepMind. And the idea is like, hey, like what if we basically automate the scientific process itself? Like basically it would take like have different LLM agents for like different parts of the scientific method, like one for like literature review, one for like running experiments, and one for like analyzing those results and writing the paper. And it was pretty impressive. I mean, it's still like, I think gonna take some time, like a lot of like human like in the loop still like makes a lot of impact, but like they were able to show that, like with like a few dollars from like idea to like final report for certain topics. So it was like pretty interesting. And I mean, we're seeing a lot of companies too kind of forming in this area, like Axiom recently, kind
the
of
math.
Like it's I think like a really interesting space.
I have a problem with it. Maybe others do, maybe others don't, of just lumping everything into science.
So yeah, it's definitely like it's like broad. Like there's like, like you said, like math, and then there's like more like the life sciences, which feels like a little bit more difficult.
They have nothing in common.
Like automating like ML research seems a little bit easier. That's like kind of my intuition than like,
Yeah,
building like a
AI for ML research.
Yeah.
Can we agree that it doesn't count as AI for science? like
I think that's a fair take. Yeah.
then everything is science. I don't know.
Yeah, you can make an argument ML research is not research. Like
More of an art.
Okay, so just generally AI for science. Any particular paper or discussion that you've had in the last couple of days that like sticks in your head?
Yeah, I think yeah, like the Asian laboratory paper.
Oh yeah. Okay.
that-
Yeah. So my comment on that is every quarter, there's somebody who will be like, "Oh yeah, we've done AI scientists."
Yeah.
And then I don't know if it goes anywhere. I don't know if it's like a proof of concept. Like, what is going on?
it depends on the example. Like going back to the AI for life science, I'll make the distinction. We had a speaker. He wrote this paper called BioOmni caching, and it started as a paper. Right now, it's he's kind of he got a lot of traction, and he's kind of continuing to develop it. I think that was the first time I was like, okay, conceptualized it. People are using it as a tool, and obviously, I think things are going to take time. Part of it is maybe to get traction. You call it like we're automating all of science, but it seems to be like in his case with BioOmni that there are people at pharmaceutical companies or bio organizations that are using it as a tool. And to what capacity, I'm not a life science expert, but I think there's probably steps from it being a tool to like automating like a lot of things. I'm skeptical of like the automation of the whole process. I like the idea of thinking more of as a virtual lab. So James O frames these AI scientists as a virtual lab, where it's like, okay,
It's cheap to experiment and explore.
exactly. So the person is the PI. And I think that vision makes a lot of sense. I think to replace, I don't know how much of it is pitching versus science, where someone's like, we're going to just completely build a scientist. Because in my view, like one of the theses of AlphaXiv, like as we go on, there's going to be more researchers, and maybe there's more tools to help them. But the actual like process of doing research is like human work is going to be like, that is one of the final frontiers of human work, is to be able to intuit and ideate and figure out what's next, right? So I see these as all like tools.
Yeah, I think just extending what Rayhahn said, I think, yeah, maybe for like, pitching or like what we see in the news, like people are like, oh, we're building like AI scientists or like an AI material scientist, but you don't actually need to do like that whole end-to-end workflow to provide value, right? Like what Rayhahn was mentioning about Biomni, like I know they're like providing a lot of value with like their tools for like, oh, we'll like sort through the literature for you, right? And like find out what's relevant, and then like help you get some experiments set up. That's like, you're not automating the whole workflow, but like it saves people a lot of time, where like researchers, they're biotech, applied people. So I think, yeah, like I'm also aligned with you that a little skeptical about automating that whole end-to-end workflow, but I think there's value intermediate parts.
Yeah. Oh, skeptical that it is actually put in practice rather than just done for a paper for marketing purposes.
Yeah.
But yeah, we can move on to other papers.
Just touching on that one last thing. Just like, a lot of the science that is done is not sound very sexy. It's a lot of like ablations. It's a lot of very sort of like road work that's manual, and obviously it's like it's not sort of doesn't require the ingenuity or sort of the human brilliance. But I think that agents are very much capable of doing a lot of the things that are required for like a lot of scientific processes, and so I think there's a tremendous value there. It's not like quite what you're talking about, like a man-10 scientist, but I think there is something there for sure.
Your paper?
Oh yeah, I mean, for me, I think something that has emerged in the last year or so has sort of been building agents with RL for long horizon, complex tasks. I think there's one specific paper that I found interesting, was like Agent R1, and so they've basically
Agent R1.
Agent R1.
I think I missed that.
But they built an end-to-end sort of RL framework for training agents on sort of like these complex reasoning tasks, and the specific reasoning task that they chose was sort of like multi-hop question answering. And so you have to train an agent to be able to interact with sort of a tool environment and sort of asks and respond to complex queries. And so, when you apply that framework on top of, a base model like Qwen 2.5, you suddenly now have an agent that is, very, very good at these more complex tasks. And I think the reason why this is interesting to me is because you see a lot of parallels in this paper to what's actually happening in like industry. Like one example of this is just like Cursor, their composer model. There's a lot of rumors online that that this was built on top of, Qwen 2.5. People saw like Chinese reasoning traces and whatnot. But I mean, we don't know exactly how they built it, but sort of these techniques, you see them.
I see them.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very popular technique to like, build on top of Qwen 2.5. But then there's the whole crop of like, RL as a service, fine tuning as a service, these sorts of things to help, companies build in-house agents. And so a lot of what we see, in enterprise industry these days is a reflection of sort of a lot of the research that's done with, AI agents and RL. So I think it's definitely very exciting.
And one thing to add there is like, so there's frontier labs aside, there's these startups that have raised like collectively hundreds of millions of dollars that are all like fine-tuning Qwen, like specifically Qwen. Because like Qwen, if you like talk to some of these folks, like Qwen was specifically designed to be like very sample efficient when it comes to like RL fine-tuning. Like they designed this when building the model, and it's so cool to see all these different startups, and it's like goes right back to Qwen and like the open source landscape. And then you see papers like Agent R1 that.
But was that DeepSeek? Literally DeepSeek R1, or that's
so I don't know why they threw an R1 in the name, but they were fine tuning.
That's the Qwen model, right? Okay.
I know.
I was like, what? Why is it?
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay. Justin here from the Qwen team.
Okay.
Yeah, so he's roaming around, and I think this is very much Qwen's year.
Yeah.
I think. In fact, comparatively, I think DeepSeek actually started the year super high, and then fell off a little bit. Which is kind of interesting.
I was just talking with one of the folks here about the presence of DeepSeek as far as like what we see on AlphaXiv. They still pull a lot of weight in terms of when they put out work, people listen. Even if
great work,
it's great work. So an
and
example was with OCR, right? They put out DeepSeek OCR, and then like the next day, like Olmo OCR 2 comes out. The startup called Chandra puts out an OCR a model. So
yeah, but if I'm not mistaken, their numbers were worse than DeepSeek still.
Yes. So, but I think it still goes back to the point of like when DeepSeek publishes, other people are very much still intact. So whether or not I don't know. It's short term to say it's fallen off or not. But
like difference of one day, it's not motivated by the DeepSeek. I don't know.
No, right. But I think they feel pressure. It's like the parallel between research and like product releases almost is like you kind of see that here.
Yeah, I mean, look, a lot of interesting papers and coverage in NeurIPS. We just covered a best paper for DeepRL. I think another like what I'm trying to make kind of exploring is like just the health of the academic paper ecosystem, which obviously you guys care a lot about. My sense from talking with area chairs and program chairs is that there's a lot of review process is not keeping up. Therefore, the conference quality process, submissions and quality is just going down. ICLR had a big scandal recently with leaking names, and like 20% of their reviews are AI. Yeah. What's your take on just like all this?
It's a shit show for sure. I think at multiple levels. One fun project we've wanted to do in AlphaXiv, I'm skeptical on if this would be good for us or not. But first of all, we've always been hesitant to put out tools that allow people to write papers with AI. So we help people understand papers with AI. We feel like something feels wrong about like, okay, people are going to write papers, which they're probably already doing. But one thing we want to put out is which papers that are trending are actually like AI generated. And you'll probably see at a very high scale, a lot of these, there's a lot of pressure to put out lots of work and do it really fast. And there's a lot of pressure to write papers quickly. And it's a very much AI in, AI out thing that we're going into. And so it's definitely problematic. And yeah, I guess there's pressure to publish, and then there's the AI tools that help people write papers, and the quality of the paper itself, I feel, has probably taken a hit. But
yeah, I think it's also interesting. Like I know some people are also working on like AI reviewers too, which is also interesting. And I mean, I have some concerns, but I think overall, if done right, it could be good for authors. Actually, if like authors get access to this and they're able to like just run their papers through these reviewers before, and they can see like, okay, like what's maybe unclear in my paper, and like what can I do to make it better. And maybe that just like now the reviewer doesn't need to spend as much time just trying to like understand and parse through, and can just like actually point out like or do like a literature review and like understand.
Yeah, it's like a linter like quality check.
Yeah, if it's not done right, then maybe people like find a way to like hack around their AI reviewer. I know Andrew Ng recently put out like the Stanford agentic reviewer, which has been getting some traction. But
I wasn't aware of that. Are you guys adopting it?
We haven't really thought too much about it yet. Yeah.
I think like one of the tools we'll want to incorporate is some type of reviewer just for the assistance for an author before they publish, like, hey, let me go through. We can tell you how much is obviously AI generated, what parts are like, what works are similar, and kind of do a breakdown. I think the linter analogy is good. I think assessing novelty is probably tricky, but as a first step, I think it can like weed out like either low quality work or I think that's probably promising.
Yeah, I was wondering just specifically on novelty and lit review, how important is search and presumably you have an index and you do RAG over the index and all that.
Yeah.
Are models good at it?
So I guess it depends on the type of queries. I guess when it comes to novelty, it's concerned, like Archive has had this problem like even early on where people would use it for like, I forget the exact term, but people would post a paper even when it's not fully developed, and then you kind of claim
for preprints.
Right, for preprints, right? So I think in terms of finding relevant literature, it's good. One of the things we kind of where our assistant differs is we'll use social signal as well. So maybe someone has some paper that didn't get a lot of traction, and I think just building semantic search isn't super helpful. But yeah.
So like Twitter or other signals?
It's a combination. So like
you don't reveal the
so we'll use like view count, semantic signal, whatever. Basically, if I was kind of rambling there, but if you just try to build a semantic assistant, things get noisy fast. So like we have an index over like
because people throw in buzzwords.
Yeah, exactly.
Of course,
right. So we have like 3 million papers in Archive. If you just try to use semantic and given some query like what are papers that do agentic reasoning, you are not going to find the relevant work. So what we do is like we know what papers people are reading, and that's a factor that weights in when we pull up relevant results. This is something we've talked about with other people have built like semantic search tools on top of Archive, and inevitably it sounds good, and then it just ends up like not returning relevant info. Again, though, the reason I was kind of rambling before is we build the assistant more from the angle of literature review rather than assessing novelty. So and those are maybe two different things. If you're purely trying to assess novelty, maybe the social signal doesn't matter. In terms of building like a really good literature review assistant, you need some weightage on like, at the end of the day, these are 3 million papers. A lot of them are low quality. So you need some signal. I have my doubts on whether just Twitter is the best form of social signal there, but we have our own in-house.
I'll also shout out Emergent Minds, which has turned YouTube into a signal, which are very good.
Yeah, they also we like the guy Matt. He like
he's part of our Lane Space Discord.
Nice. Yeah, he also has like the AlphaXiv like stats on,
so you can sort. I also kind of
yeah. I see.
Yeah, we have like a lightweight collab.
But the YouTube thing is his thing, not yet. Yeah. I find the YouTube thing very, very useful.
Yeah, and kind of extending off that, like I think nowadays research it's not just the paper, right? It's like a whole package of like. More and more people are opening the code base, which is great, and we hope to continue seeing that. And so, like, there's a paper, GitHub if it's available. People have like a tweet thread. There's like a website. If it's like robotics, for instance, there's like video demos. Like, there's so much more than just a paper. So, like, one day if we can index all of that into our assistant, kind of make it as good as possible for like finding all of this relevant research information. You already mentioned, we're doing papers with code, so like benchmarks as well. Like, I think that will be really powerful.
Yeah, all I will say is a lot of people are cheating at the GitHub thing where they only put like a README.
We see those and we make sure to not.
Okay.
One thing to build on that is in the next 5-10 years, like the paper as an artifact is going to be less and less useful. Like I think like research will move away from, and we're feeling that here, right? Like at the end of the day, I was saying this earlier about what a paper is. It's like describing what the new implementation is, what the numbers were. But that's an implementation. Like how much does the paper tell you there? So I think having really organized, useful implementations is going to be the future of research. That paper is just a PDF is such an antiquated way of sharing information.
It's Lindy,
right? And that's why we exist, and we kind of make that more frictionless.
It also like totally aligns with what we see in our user base today. Like we have like tons of users who are like not necessarily trained researchers. Like they're not in academia, they're in industry. They're not at like the big labs. They're like kind of what we call like applied AI researchers or like research engineers. And like they're at companies, like for instance, like they're obviously big companies, but there's also like companies like Spotify, Expedia, Nintendo, where it's like you don't traditionally associate with like AI research, but like as part of their job now, like they need to keep up to date with the latest research for like some product or feature that they're building, right? And it's like, to be honest, a lot of them don't really care about papers. They're just like, it's part of the job. And like, for them, it's like really hard starting with what paper should I be reading to, okay, like how do I quickly understand the core idea? And what they all ultimately want to know is like, will this work for like what I'm trying to build, right? And like getting to from that like paper to implementation is like a huge gap right now. Starting with like you said, yeah, people are cheating on the GitHub, like it's not actually useful. Or like even if it's there, like a lot of times like setting up the code base with the right dependencies is like a huge pain. So we're thinking about, Rayhahn mentioned like doing Docker containers for papers and like.
Yeah, that was the original idea for Replicate. Yeah, they pivoted, I guess.
Yeah.
And then I think now I would point to Harbor. I don't know if from the terminal bench folks, that would be an interesting equivalent, not paper focused, more RL environment focused, but you could reuse the infra.
I mean, yeah, this just going back onto sort of the whole paper discussion. I think like you just have to look at the graph of like archive submissions. The last like 10 years, it's just exponential. And then
Especially to like the CS.
exactly the CS AI like
30,000 a month. It's great.
I mean, like, and you can have things like like an AI agent to review these stuff for like peer review, but like ultimately, I think the end state here needs to be that we just don't care about papers as much. At the end of the day, like all researchers want is to
Useful
they
ideas.
just open source the repo, open source the weights, and give me a sandbox where I can quickly verify your thoughts or verify whatever ideas and whatever contribution that you're making. And the easier that you make that loop, instead of having to like read the paper and then like do a lot of nonsense to work through their like Slop repo and then try to replicate it yourself. Faster you close that loop, you'll see a lot less of this like Slop submission and stuff like that. And I think it'll be a lot healthier of an ecosystem.
Okay, like obviously you guys do what you think is best. If I were a friend and advisor to the company, I would be like, you might be biting off more than you can chew.
Yeah.
This is an impossible task.
Yeah. So one thing about the point about replicate, which I was just going to add, which is rather than viewing this as like a reproduction or like a reproducibility problem of like, oh, we need to try to re-verify the results on all these papers and make it easy. I think we go back to the point which their user base are applied researchers. They don't care about which works have the best numbers in their paper, but they care about like which works are easiest to implement, right? And so there's some subset of those, and like, can we make it easy for those folks? So if there's an academic that says, hey, I want this arbitrary thing implemented, it's like, hey, we can't do this. Use the fact that there's some power law here in terms of implemented papers that people really want, and make that experience really easy. For example, even think about, we were talking about the other day with one of the researchers at NeurIPS who's like, I haven't actually like played around with LoRa. I was like, what has stopped you from doing that? It's like, can we make just super simple on really popular works, make it really easy to iterate on that directly on top of the platform? And whether there's, some obscure work that has great numbers, like whether we can reproduce that is not in the space of things we care about.
Specifically, if you have anything involving GPUs, I would call it launchables from NVIDIA.
Yeah.
That's came through an acquisition of Brev, which I used to be an investor in. I mean, there's like domain specific ways to do these things, but they're not widely socialized.
I think the last thing what Rayhahn briefly touched on is like this power law that we see a lot is like archive has over 2.4 million papers, but there's a huge power law on like what are the actual like most viewed papers, and it's very long tailed, right? It's like if we can just like kind of focus on like what would be most helpful for the vast majority of people and just make those really easy for people to build off of, I think that's like a good starting point. We don't need to do this for every paper, and even if initially it's like a little bit of like scaffolding, like I think if you're saving time for this like exponentially growing group of like research engineers, like
one super last point here, which is one thing we're working on is having an agent that can autonomously set up a Docker container for a paper based on the code base. And now, let's say on a certain set of papers it doesn't work and it's going to need handholding, right? One thing down the line is the onus of this we want to put on the author, which is, hey, we rank papers by implementation ease. So that's what applied researchers care about, right?
Yeah.
So if the agent can
Usually to incentivize.
If the agent already, we have authors that come to us saying like, how do I rank higher on the AlphaXiv feed? Or like, for one, if you don't have a GitHub code base, like you should add one and that'll help you. But you can imagine now if people our user base are applied researchers, so they care about only implementation ease. We sort it by implementation ease, and whether the agent can knock out some hard, some issue setting up paper, well, that's now on the onus of the author there, and our user base wouldn't be super interested in implementing them in the first place.
Awesome. Very good cause. I'm happy to promote it, and congrats on your success so far. We'll see what happens in 2026.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
so much.
Yeah, thank you.